They called her the widow's curse out in Silver Rock and across every ranch near Ironwood Wells. And that name stuck to Clara Monroe like dust on weathered boots. 33 years old, elegant in a way that caught stares yet dreaded like a bad omen. Two husbands buried before their time. One after only a few months, the other not long after. Folks didn't bother with how it happened. They only cared that it did. They whispered that death trailed her home like a starving dog. Children dared each other to say her name after nightfall. Men stepped off the boardwalk when she came near. Some called her cursed, some called her dangerous, but not a soul called her friend. Clara learned to live in solitude. A cabin by the stone well at Ironwood Wells, with silence for her company. She kept her eyes lowered, her words rare. Her heart locked tighter than the root cellar where she stored winter apples. Life had carved her into something cold and untouchable. Or at least that's what the town believed. Yet there were nights she stared at the lamp's flame too long, and mornings when she could barely bear the weight of her own loneliness. Then came the day the desert gave her something she hadn't asked for. A man lying broken in the dust, the sun blazing down on his face, skin cracked beneath the Nevada heat. Jonas Mercer, once strong, now torn apart by bullets, abandoned to die on a trail no one traveled unless they had to. The ground beneath him was split and yellow, blood soaking into the dirt like spilled whiskey. His lips were cracked, his breath shallow, his eyes barely open. Most folks would have walked on. A cursed widow and a dying man. The desert could have swallowed them both, and no one would have cared. But Clara stopped. She stood over him longer than she should have, watching that stubborn spark flicker in his eyes. A spark that said he wasn't ready to be gone. Against every whisper, against every instinct to guard herself, she bent down and pulled him up. It took all her strength to drag him back to the cabin. Each step felt like she was hauling more than a man, as if she were dragging fate itself through the sand. When Jonas woke, pale as chalk, voice raw as gravel, he looked at her and forced out one line. "You're going to regret this." It wasn't anger, not a threat, just the tired truth of a man who knew trouble too well. Clara pressed a rag to his wound and said nothing. For the first time in years, the silence in her shack didn't feel hollow. Yet in that silence, something darker lingered. Because if the town was right, then saving him might have been the most dangerous choice she ever made. The days that followed in that cabin were slow, heavy, and hushed. Clara Monroe wasn't a healer, but she knew how to keep a man alive. She boiled water, tore cloth for bandages, spoon-fed broth into Jonas Mercer when he was too weak to hold a spoon. He said little, and she said even less. Still, the silence between them wasn't the empty kind she had carried for years. It was the sort of silence that held weight, that bound two souls inside it. Jonas's body fought to mend. His hands, roughened from years on the range, twitched at night as if still tying rope or gripping iron. Clara noticed how he clenched his jaw in sleep, how his breath caught whenever the pain cut too deep. Once, when she wiped the blood away, he opened his eyes and nearly looked ashamed of needing her. For a man like him, leaning on someone else must have felt like a sin. Clara, try not to care. Try to keep her distance. She reminded herself of the whispers, the stares, the warning she had carried since burying her second husband. But each time Jonas fought for breath, each time his lips moved as though chasing ghosts in his sleep, something inside her softened. Against her better judgment, she began waiting for his eyes each morning. Sometimes she even caught herself humming, just to fill the room with something warmer than silence. On the third evening, Jonas asked for water. His voice still rough, but there was life in it. He studied her in the lamplight, as if trying to figure out where fate had led him. She met his eyes only for a moment before looking away, her hands tight on the cup. When he finally drank, he coughed so hard the water nearly spilled across the floor. Clara shot him a sharp look, the kind of look that hides laughter behind iron. For just a moment, the cabin felt less like a sick room and more like a place where life might still grow. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a flicker, a fragile spark between two souls who had nothing left but loss. And here's the part that keeps you leaning forward. Neither of them knew that shadows from their past were about to ride back into their lives. Neither knew that saving Jonas Mercer would stir up ghosts Clara thought were buried for good. Out west, peace never lasts. It slips through your fingers like dry sand. For a few days in that shack, Jonas Mercer and Clara Monroe lived in something close to quiet. But quiet in the desert is only a trick. Trouble isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. That evening the air was thick, the kind of heat that makes the walls sweat. Clara stepped outside to draw water when she spotted a figure on the trail. A rider. Slow, deliberate, too steady to be wandering. Her stomach sank cold. By the time the stranger tied his horse by the fence, Jonas was already upright, a hand to his chest, eyes sharp despite the pain. The man at the door was Elias Kane. Folks in Nevada knew his name even if they had never seen his face. A bounty hunter once, now more outlaw than lawman. He had the kind of smile that never touched his eyes. He walked in without asking, let his gaze wander over the cabin, then fixed it on Clara. She froze like a rabbit beneath a hawk's shadow. Kane spoke low, easy, like a rattler sliding through grass. Said he heard tales of a dying man dragged from the desert, patched up by a cursed widow. Said it was funny how fate liked to gather the broken in one place. Then he looked at Jonas, and his grin stretched wider. Reminded him of debts unpaid, of trails where blood had already been spilled. Clara felt her knees weaken, but Jonas pushed himself upright, voice cracking like dry timber. You'll have to go through me first. There was no bravado in it, only the sound of a man with nothing left to lose. Kane laughed, slow and cruel. He didn't draw his iron. Not yet. He liked the weight of fear more than the pull of a trigger. He circled them with words sharp as knives, hinting at truths Clara had buried, dangling them like bait. And for the first time in years, her cabin felt smaller than a coffin. If you're watching this now, you can feel it, can't you? That tightening in your chest, the sense something awful is about to break loose. And trust me, you don't want to miss the moment it does. If stories like this hold you the way they hold me, tap that subscribe before we ride further. Because every turn of this tale digs deeper into the Wild West, and what's coming next will keep you leaning in. That night, the desert went silent in a way that pressed on your ears. Under the Nevada moon, even coyotes held their breath. Inside Clara's shack, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of oil lamps and gunpowder ghosts. Elias Kane hadn't left. He leaned on the doorway, boots dust-deep, smile cold, like he had all the time in the world. He knew fear worked slower than bullets, and he liked it that way. Jonas sat propped against the wall, shirt still dark with blood, revolver heavy in his lap. Weak, but his eyes locked on Kane, steady as fence posts. Clara stood by the table, hands restless on the edge, trying not to tremble. She had lived with whispers and stares for years, but this was different. This was danger breathing inside her home. Kane's voice rolled slow, easy, like a snake. He spoke of men he had killed, of trails painted red, of how some folks were meant to outlast others. Each word cut. Each word reminded Jonas he was half dead already, reminded Clara that everything she touched turned to loss. He laughed when he saw her flinch. The lamp flickered. The wind rattled the shutters. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Kane shifted his weight, and the room snapped tight as a coiled rope. Jonas raised his revolver, his hand shaking. Kane's grin widened. He loved a game. Drew slow, savoring the fear, certain his speed would end it all. But Clara didn't freeze this time. She drew one breath and blew out the lamp. Darkness swallowed the cabin. The room exploded with sound. Boots scraped wood, the click of a hammer, the crack of a gunshot, smoke and fire in the dark. For long seconds, no one knew who had fallen. Then a body thudded against the boards. Silence heavier than thunder followed. Clara's heart pounded as she reached in the dark, her hand finding Jonas's shoulder. He was still there, still breathing. Kane groaned, his laugh broken, blood pooling where the bullet found him. His voice rasped one last time, bitter and cold. This ain't over. Not for her. Even dying, a man like him found words sharp enough to wound. If you're watching this, ask yourself, would you have blown out that lamp? Or would fear have nailed your boots to the floor? It's in moments like this that stories grip us tight. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. When dawn broke over Ironwood Wells, the light felt different. The cabin still smelled of smoke and powder, floorboards still stained with blood, but there was also relief, the kind that only comes after surviving a night you thought might be your last. Elias Kane was gone, his body just another reminder that evil can ride right into your home when you least expect it. But he was gone all the same. Jonas Mercer sat on the porch, battered, still pale, but alive. Clara Monroe stood at the well, her hands raw from scrubbing, her eyes weary but steady. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking of what the town whispered behind her back. She wasn't the widow's curse that morning. She was simply a woman who chose to fight, and who hadn't fought alone. Together they hitched a wagon and carried Kane into Silver Rock. Folks stopped in the street when they saw them. The same townspeople who once crossed the street to avoid Clara now stared in silence. She had been the cursed widow, the one men joked about after whiskey, the ghost who frightened children. Now she was the woman who brought down Elias Kane, a name even strong men spoke soft. The sheriff took the body, but the real judgment came from the people's eyes. Some nodded respect, some looked ashamed, some whispered quieter than before. Clara didn't need their approval, but it mattered anyway. She was no longer just a shadow. Back at the cabin, the days turned slower. Jonas healed. Clara hummed by the fire, not from habit, but from peace. There were no declarations, no rings, no promises carved in wood. Just two souls broken by the world, now sitting side by side, mending the only way they knew how. Sometimes healing doesn't come with speeches. Sometimes it comes in the simple act of sharing silence with someone who understands it. And that's where the story leaves them, by the old well beneath the Nevada sky. Scarred, but not finished. Maybe that's the lesson. That even when the world names you cursed, even when loss tries to brand you forever, there's still a chance for another chapter. Do you believe in that? Do you believe people can heal, even after years of being broken? Out here in the West, sometimes the ones called cursed are the very ones who save us. That's a truth worth carrying, no matter how heavy it feels. If this story moved you, if it stirred something inside, give it a like. And if you want more tales of the Wild West, stories of grit, of loss, of quiet love that keeps folks alive, make sure you hit subscribe. Because out here in the West, there are 1,000 more stories waiting. And each one might just change the way you see.